Japan's first regulated yen stablecoin is surging in usage. Today, I'll explain what this yen stablecoin signals for US stablecoins like USDC. Let's get right into it. Amazon, one of the largest tech companies in the world, is going to have its supplier of its Amazon Japan division pay 2,300 business partners, including truck drivers, in crypto using JPYC, a Japanese yen-backed stablecoin. This is literally the first large Japanese corporate rollout using stablecoins. To note, this supplier, AZCom, does around $1.4 billion in annual revenue. With this move, its partners, including subcontractors, can totally bypass the traditional banking system. This has been one of the biggest use cases for stablecoins and blockchain technology because using crypto to send payments is much cheaper for businesses than using the traditional banking system. Why? Because transactions can settle in seconds or minutes instead of days and are not hampered by expensive banking mechanisms like SWIFT, which make international payments very slow and costly. So what is JPYC? It's Japan's first fully regulated yen-pegged stablecoin. It is issued by a Tokyo-based fintech firm called JPYC Incorporated and officially launched in October 2025 under Japan's Payment Services Act, which allowed the token to be used as a payment token under certain rules, such as maintaining a hard one-to-one peg with the Japanese yen. And the token has done phenomenal. So the license that JPYC Incorporated received in August 2025 basically made it a legal money transmitter. Although it officially launched the regulated compliant token October 27, 2025, it did have an unregulated version before that time, where it launched on multiple blockchains like Avalanche, Polygon, and Ethereum. However, the launch in October immediately had a huge impact on the number of transactions, as you can see. Transaction figures rose rapidly on the three chains, which was basically flat looking at the previous 2 years from July 2023 to 2025. And we can see Polygon's transaction count increased 7x from 7,800 in July 2025 to almost 60,000 in July 2026. Avalanche volume is up 14x from 237 transactions to around 3,300 in the same period for the month. Ethereum's monthly transaction count went up 25x over the same period, from 185 transactions to 4,700 transactions in July 2026. So this impact was huge. Looking on a cumulative basis, if you're comparing year-to-date transactions in 2026 versus 2024, you can see that Polygon's transaction count is up 3x, Avalanche is up 74x, and Ethereum is up 22x. Now, Nikaya is a relatively new EVM chain, but it's built on top of the 250 million user base from the Kakao Talk, which is South Korea's #1 messaging app with around 47 million monthly active users, or over 90% of the population, as well as the Line messaging app, which is dominant in Japan with around 92 million monthly active users. When you add in the additional Asian countries, it's no wonder why this EVM chain has gained so many transactions so fast for the JPYC stablecoin. Because everyday drivers and subcontractors who may work with the Amazon supplier already have it and can use it to take wage payments without needing a separate crypto wallet. Now remember, the JPYC stablecoin is pegged to the yen 1-to-1, meaning that for every stablecoin, it must be backed by a yen deposit or a Japan government bond. Sound familiar? Well, it should, because the Payment Services Act in Japan is very similar to the Genius Act, which passed in the United States last year, which also made stablecoins a form of payment, and which also require all U.S. stablecoins to be backed 1-to-1 with U.S. government issued assets such as cash or liquid government U.S. debt. But the question is, why haven't we seen this surge in transactions in the United States yet? Well, it's complicated. U.S. regulators, while passing the Genius Act, have failed to finalize on a lot of the proposed rules. Let me explain. So after the Genius Law Act was passed on July 18, 2025, it had a provision They gave regulators like the OCC, the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, and other institutions a year to come up with regulations to actually implement the law. Well, July 18, 2026 came, and the government agencies had not come up with the final rules. Instead, they proposed multiple rules for discussion and public feedback. Now, it's important to note that the government agencies missing this deadline does not put a pause to the bill. The bill was intended for the government agency to issue the final rules and then have at least 120 days before implementation starts. However, they do not have unlimited time. On January 18, 2027, the Genius Act will take effect, meaning the latest they have to send out the final rules and still give everyone 120 days for implementation is around September 20th, 2026. I'll note that this does not change the hard set date of January 18, 2027 when the Genius Act takes effect. Even if regulators are late, such as issuing final rules on January 1st, they still only have 18 days until implementation starts on January 18th. And later, a very big key milestone happens on July 18, 2028, as then it will no longer be legal to have U.S. digital asset providers offer non-compliant USD stablecoins, which means tokens like USDC and other stablecoins like USDT must be compliant, having all of their reserves in US issued assets like US dollars or treasury debt. Now, that won't be a problem for some tokens like USDC, but tokens like USDT in particular, who actually have reserves in gold, would fail to meet the Genius Act requirements of having that one-to-one backing. So the period that we are in now does leave a lot of regulatory uncertainty, which could cause companies like Amazon and Walmart to hold back from fully rolling out US stablecoins in the US in the same way that Amazon's supplier did in Japan. However, there's hope. There's definitely a renewed push to finally pass comprehensive crypto regulation in the US. For the Genius Act, which is already passed, we can expect for those government agencies to eventually come out with the final rules. Because most of the elected officials do realize that if they don't, it will definitely place the US at a global competitive disadvantage as other countries do make crypto rules. Countries such as Japan embrace crypto regulation that allows its companies to take on the full advantages of blockchain technology. So when the US does have final regulatory clarity on crypto, we can expect to see a surge in transactions on blockchains like Ethereum, Polygon, or Avalanche, similar to the transaction surge that we saw happen on these blockchains after the JPYC stablecoin was adopted in Japan. So what's the angle? A Japan-like adoption in the US could see transactions surge by millions of amounts on blockchains, which could ultimately increase the market value of the tokens behind these blockchains. But these are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, believe it has some valuable insights, hit the subscribe button, turn on those notifications, and I'll see you next time.